10:14. Good morning, everybody, and to those of you who are Zooming in, welcome to you as well. I know that we had a bunch of different services this weekend, I think 5. We still have one more to go today. I preached at the 4:30, 7:30, and Right 3, and one of the stories that I shared was the story of a Roman Catholic order in New Orleans that always prays that the hurricanes go anywhere, well, they dissipate, right? They have a special prayer. So I thought I would bring one of their prayers to our time today. The Lord be with you. Let us pray. O God, master of this passing world, hear the humble voices of your children. The Sea of Galilee obeyed your order and returned to its former quietude. You are still the master of land and sea. We live in the shadow of a danger over which we have no control. The Gulf, like a provoked and angry giant, can awake from its seeming lethargy, overstep its conventional boundaries, invade our land, and spread chaos and disaster. During hurricane seasons, we turn to you, O loving Father. Spare us from past tragedies whose memories are still so vivid and whose wounds seem to refuse to heal with the passing of time. O Virgin, Star of the Sea, our beloved Mother, we ask you to plead with your Son in our behalf, so that, spared from the calamities common to this area and animated with a true spirit of gratitude, we will walk in the footsteps of your divine Son to reach the heavenly Jerusalem, where a storm-less eternity awaits us. Amen. Oh, now I guess you want me to introduce you? Sure. So I'm going to introduce Mick Moore. Many of you will know him, former senior warden, I think once or twice maybe. Been at this church for a long, long time. His children were reared here and sent off to college. His bride has been a catechist for many years as well. A great leader and source of wisdom in many ways. His family owns and manages the Vanderbilt Beach Resort along with the Turtle Club there. So they're no stranger to hurricane impacts. Come on up, Mick.
All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here, and good morning to everyone on Zoom as well. In a moment, I'm going to introduce the rest of the committee. The purpose of the meeting today is to briefly describe what we've been working on for the last several months, the progress that we've made, and then most importantly, to hear from all of you regarding suggestions and comments and any questions you have. I can tell you that we have not figured it all out yet, but we have come a long way into understanding some of the options that we have before us. Ultimately, our job as a committee is to make a report and recommendations to the vestry, which will then decide what to do to hopefully improve the flooding problem that this church is experiencing. So, this is how we're going to proceed today. What we're going to try to do is I'm going to move very quickly through some information that is going to get us all on the same page. So we have some people sitting here who've been here for a long time, are very familiar with the church's different assets and all of the storms we've had for a long time. And there are other people who are new, who maybe don't understand everything the church has, needs to protect, what's a problem, what's not, and then what's happened both historically and in recent storms. So for the first 20 minutes or so, I'm going to go quickly through a lot of information, and it's just designed to get everybody up on the same page. And then we're hoping to open it up to all of you with any comments, questions, suggestions you have. I can tell you that any of you who have sent emails to the Flood Resilience Committee, we have read them. We've read all of them. So we're very up to speed on everything that everybody has already suggested, but I'm sure we'll be talking about many of those things today. Okay, so I'd like to start by introducing the committee members, and if they could please stand up, or at least just, I guess they don't need to stand, they can just sort of wave as we go through here. We've got quite a good committee. First, I'll introduce Casey Weidmiller. So Casey is my co-chair. Casey has grown up in Naples. He's grown up in this church. He's a former senior warden and a lifelong parishioner. Mark Borelli, I don't think Mark is here. Oh, there he is. There's Mark. So Mark's a member of the church, and he is a general contractor in Naples, so he has a lot of experience on the construction side of things. John Ike. John Ike is a former vestry member and warden, and John is also a retired engineer. David Fite. So David's a church member. His wife, Jean, is currently on the vestry, and David is very involved in flood resiliency planning and in a leadership role with the Association of Condominiums on Gulf Shore Boulevard. He is in the middle of it. Connie Fuller. Connie is a member of the vestry and is currently the junior warden of the church. Helene McGill. Helene is our church treasurer. Kim McQueen. Kim is our parish administrator. She is knee-deep in all of the remediation efforts after the last storms. And then last but not least, my dad, Mike Moore. As Edward mentioned, we've been in the hotel business on the beach here since my grandfather bought it in '68, so we've seen everything that's come through since '68. And then, of course, last but not least, Father Edward, who is always helping us with a guiding hand here as we do our work. So the purpose of the committee, really the question is, what can and should Trinity-by-the-Cove do proactively to prevent and or mitigate storm damage from hurricane flooding, but we don't want to forget winds too, on both a short-term basis and a long-term basis. So the church assets, I'm just going to go through this rather quickly. We'll start with the church itself. Consecrated in 1953, it's 5 feet above mean sea level, which means it's below FEMA elevation, which is 8 feet. The main structure is original. The church is not on pilings. It has an interesting slab system for anybody who's in the construction industry. You can always ask Mark about that later and he can explain it. And many parts of the structure do not meet current code because of its age. The rose windows were replaced in 2014 with impact glass, but the other windows are not impact glass. It has no fire protection, no sprinklers, no fire alarm system. Mechanical, electrical, and security systems are typical of a 72-year-old building. They're various ages. And the new organ that we're proceeding with will require significant structural and mechanical improvements to the building before it is eventually installed. There's a picture of the original church. Parish hall. The parish hall that we're sitting in now consists of a large hall, kitchen, conference room, library, family room, choir room, and other spaces. It was reconstructed in 2020, and it was raised 3.5 feet above its original elevation, so it's now above FEMA flood elevation of 8 feet. And this parish hall, as most of you know, did not flood in the recent storms. Didn't flood in Ian, and it didn't flood this summer. The office wing, which is right over there, the office wing was originally at the same elevation as the parish hall, and when the parish hall was reconstructed and elevated, the office wing was renovated, but it was not raised. So it sits substantially lower. There's a set of stairs out there that you have to go down to get to the church offices. The classroom wing, and this consists of the atriums, the youth room. The classroom wing was constructed in 2004. It's a nursery, 3 classrooms, and a youth room. And it includes the church mouse and the facilities office. And its finished floor elevation is approximately 5.5 feet, so it is also below FEMA. It was not raised up. The rectory. The rectory is located adjacent to, west of the parish hall. It was relocated to that site in 2004. It was picked up and moved, and it was raised in the process. So its finished floor elevation is approximately 9 feet, so it is above FEMA, and it did not flood in the recent storms. Parsonage. How many of you knew we had a parsonage? Okay. The parsonage is where Father Nicholas and his family lives. The parsonage is owned by the church. It's located in Autumn Woods. It's a residence, which is Autumn Woods, for those of you who don't know, is in between Pine Ridge Road and Vanderbilt Beach Road. So it's 9 miles north of the main campus, and its finished flood elevation is above FEMA, and so it has not flooded either. It's in the neighborhood there. So historical storm impacts. We'll go through this fairly quickly. So for most of its existence, since the 50s, Trinity-by-the-Cove has not suffered from flooding caused by hurricanes. The one exception was Hurricane Donna, which made landfall near Goodland in September 1960, and that flooded the church. But for the next 62 years, even with all of the hurricanes that came through here and affected us, we had no flooding. And this is not new news to anybody who's lived here that long. We know that most of the storm events were wind events. They were not flooding events. I've got some pictures here of sort of what Naples looked like back in the Hurricane Donna days with flooding. So for anyone who went through Hurricane Ian, looks similar. Cars damaged. You can see the level of water there. So fast forward to Hurricane Irma 2017. Hurricane Irma was primarily a wind event. You can see that's one of the big banyan trees that we lost, I think, on, it might have been Creighton or somewhere along there. And then this is a picture of a gas station covering that was destroyed. We had a lot of trees down at the resort. It was a chainsaw event. Anybody who was here knows you heard the sound of chainsaws for months after that, but no water. So there were gusts measured at 140 miles per hour at the airport. Trinity had some wind damage, but negligible or no flooding. Hurricane Ian, 2022. That's what downtown looked like near the hospital. Huge water event. Everybody take a good look at that picture. So the church flooded in that. That was the worst flooding that we've had since Hurricane Donna. You can see the water, the level of water outside of the church there. The entire church was surrounded by water. So Ian made landfall near Sanibel. Storm surge reached 8 to 10 feet. It completely flooded Port Royal, Old Naples, downtown, and Trinity had extensive flood damage. We had about 3 feet of water in the church. 3 feet of water. And the office wing and the classrooms were also flooded to about the same level. So the parish hall here, which had been raised in 2020, no flooding, no water. And the rectory also no water. The cost of reconstruction was $1.2 million to reconstruct. And the church was back in service by mid-November, but it was late January before the offices and classrooms were ready for use. And there's really, dealing with the flooding, there's kind of multiple components of problems with it, right? There's just the physical damage and the cost of repair. Then there's the delay and the effect on church programs and us doing what we need to do. And then there's the psychological impact on staff and parishioners in dealing with the aftermath of flooding. And if you've ever been through something like that, you know what I mean. Here's a picture of the church. This must be something that Edward took. Edward, did you take this picture? Yeah. So you can see the water in there. It's a bit dark. Edward will get his flash down next time. Little joke there, Edward. I'm sure that was the least of your concerns. So here we have some of the remediation. You can see the drywall cut out of the narthex there, which all had to come out. And here you can see the parquet floor by the altar being ripped up. That wood floor had to be all ripped up. And you can see here it being reconstructed completely. Fast forward to Hurricane Helene this summer, September 2024. So these are pictures from around Naples of Hurricane Helene, which we know along the coast brought in a tremendous amount of sand. It brought water and feet of sand. Fortunately for the church, even though it was 200 miles west of Naples and a lot of storm surge here, maximum surface water elevation in Naples Bay was 6.5 feet. The water level came within inches of coming in the buildings, but it did not actually flood the buildings, but it came very, very close. And then, of course, we have Milton, October of this year. These are pictures of some of the city streets in Milton. And that's a picture outside of the church, 20 inches high outside of the church. This is a picture that Edward took of his neighbor here on Galleon Drive. You can see the water flooding. The classrooms did flood. You can see the sheen of water in the classrooms. So less than 2 weeks after Helene came and dumped all that sand and brought all that water, Milton made landfall in Siesta Key around Sarasota, the second most intense hurricane ever recorded over the Gulf of Mexico. And the surge was 7.6 feet. So Ian, I think, was 8 something. Milton 7.6, and I think we said Helene was 6.5. So the highest level outside the church was 20 inches outside the church. But we had put some flood protection measures in place, and we were taping the doors with waterproof tape and sandbags. So the depth in the church was 1 to 2 inches compared to the 20-foot depth outside the church. Still, doors, trim, saturated. They have to rip all that out. They have to dry it. It's not as bad as having 20 inches in there, but once you get anything in, it's still bad. You still have to do a lot of the same work. The classroom wing had extensive damage, several inches of water, even with aluminum flood panels on the outside. Office wing had minor flood damage. So the church was returned to service in November, but it was mid-January before you could have limited activities in the classroom wing. And we'll talk, when we get a little further on, we'll talk a little bit about some of the things we did there. Here you can see the classroom remediation happening, where the carpet had to be thrown out. They removed the baseboard. This is obviously in the church, once again. So a summary, briefly. The church, it's mostly original, below FEMA grade. It's flooded 2 times in the last 2 years. Office wings, constructed with the original parish hall, not raised up when the parish hall was redone. It's flooded twice in the last 2 years. The classrooms, constructed in 2004, below FEMA, flooded twice in the last 2 years. The parish hall, raised in 2020, above FEMA, no flooding. The rectory, moved and raised in 2004, above FEMA, no flooding. And the parsonage in Autumn Woods, construction of that house, it was constructed above FEMA, no flooding. So let me tell you a little bit about the committee's approach. Our approach, we're calling it the threefold approach. I like it because it's like the three-legged stool of the Episcopal Church, right? So number 1, protection and preparation to keep water out. So what can we do to keep water out of these spaces? And what can we do to increase our ability to prepare for storms, whether it's moving things out, keeping water out, protection and preparation. 2, mitigation and remediation to speed recovery. So if water gets in, what can we do to make it easier, faster to clean up and make it so it does less damage? And that's really looking at construction materials. And number 3, building alteration to prevent damage and downtime. We saw that every time we've raised up a structure, we haven't had any damage or any downtime. So looking at that approach as a long-term approach. So these first 2 approaches, protection and preparation, mitigation and remediation, we're calling them short-term. They could also be mid-term approaches. And this last approach, building alteration, we're really talking about a long-term approach. So those are kind of the things we're looking at. And the real question is, what can we do to protect the church for the next 25, 50, or 100 years? Nobody has a crystal ball. But if you are like most of us who've lived through the last 4 or 5 years, the storms, we've had no flooding for 60 years, and we've had 2 flooding events in the last 2 years, with 1 almost flooding event in the last 2 years. And so, it's prudent for us to be asking this question: what can and should we do to protect the church for the future? Not just the short term, but for the long term. So the current status, what we've considered. Well, first, let me just talk briefly about remediation after Helene and Milton. So the classrooms in remediation, when they took out the carpet, we've poured an epoxy floor in there. So we're not putting carpet back in there. We can put throw rugs back in there for the children, but it now has an epoxy floor that's waterproof. And then the drywall that had to be cut out, we're looking at materials that are waterproof drywall materials up to like 3 feet high or so. Same thing for the mouse. So if those areas flood again, we're hoping that we can get in there much, much faster. And we'll talk about some of this waterproof drywall. We're looking at moving outlets up, doing things just to make it easier to get back in those areas. And Kim McQueen and John Ike and Edward have been working very hard with the remediation of these areas. The kids are back in the classrooms now. The Church Mouse is pretty much getting set to resume what they do, with some modifications coming after the season for them. And of course, we're back in the church. So short-term solution ideas that we have already considered, so you know what we're already looking at. So as you think about it and give us suggestions, you know what we're already considering. Protection to keep water out, flood protection barriers, aqua fence. So everybody probably saw on the news that with Milton, the Tampa General Hospital had this aqua fence system around the entire hospital, and it kept the water out. It's a company that's based, I believe they're in the Netherlands. Is that right? I think they're in the Netherlands. And we have contacted the company, and we've asked them, they've asked for details about our property. We've provided that, and we're waiting to hear from them, and they'll give us an analysis of whether that could work here and cost and all that. So that's number one. Number two, Flood Risk America flood panels. These are panels that bolt to the side of the doors. We have them at the resort. They have a rubber gasket, and we're looking at that. There's some issues with the city locally. David Feit is working on that. The city is trying to figure out what they're going to require to allow these to be installed. They haven't decided yet. They're getting close. Tiger Dam water-filled barriers. We had some comments come into the email about these water barriers that have been used by people very effectively, and so we're looking at that as well. And then finally, other systems. When we started floodproofing the resort, we used a company called floodproofing.com. They're a distributor for 15, 20 different types of flood protection products. So they're going to come soon, probably within the next week, and meet with us here on site, look around, and tell us for the things that we have to protect, what do they think is the best solution. But we're open to other solutions. But these are all the flood protection systems we've looked at so far. A number of you suggested, what about building a wall around the church? And this could be a short wall, bigger wall, and could you possibly do that? And then within the openings, flood barrier that. So we're looking at that. We're looking at whether that would be effective in stopping the water from coming into the church. Mitigation and remediation to speed recovery. So we're looking at construction materials that would not be affected by flood. One of the biggest problems with properties all up and down the Gulf Coast is we all use drywall. And when drywall gets wet, it wicks the water up, and you have to cut the drywall, usually 4 feet up. And then you have to wait for a drywall person to come and replace it, which it's getting harder to get those drywall people, and it takes a long time. So what can we use instead of drywall? There is a company out there called EnduraFlood that makes like a waterproof drywall. It's like panels that go onto the wall about 4 feet up. They have sort of a chair rail, and it's a system that you can take down after a storm if it gets flooded, dry behind it, wipe it off, put it back up. So we're trying to determine whether that's appropriate for some or all of our spaces. It might not be enough. It might not be a nice enough finish, but there are some other products out there that might work for that. So at least we could get back in faster. In the classrooms, we put back in starboard cabinets. This is that heavy-duty plastic that looks pretty much just like wood, so that if those classrooms flood again, those cabinets won't have to be removed and thrown in the trash because they're not affected by water. And we had the epoxy flooring in classrooms, which is waterproof, and we're looking at other systems so that, as flooding becomes a bigger problem, certainly in Florida, more and more people are designing and inventing products that can withstand a flood. And so we're looking for all those. So if anybody has any suggestions there or knows of anything, that would be great. Remediation equipment. Remediation is a big deal, getting in after you get the water out and drying the place, dehumidifying it. And so we're looking at whether we should own our own remediation equipment. Edward just forwarded a message from the Oregon company that explained that even if any water in the church, the humidity that's created by that water within a short time can really do a lot of damage to woodwork and mechanical equipment. So if you're going to get any water in the church, you've got to get it out really fast. So those are some of the things we're looking at. Long-term solution ideas. We are looking at whether we can raise the church. We're consulting with, historically our architects have been McWard architects who've done most of our renovations, but we're also consulting with Hart Howerton, which is the architects who are doing the Four Seasons Hotel. They are doing the Old Naples Hotel on 3rd Street, and they are also doing the Port Royal Club. So they're well aware of our area, what's required, what the city needs, and we're consulting with them and with contractors. Don Garrett, who built the building we're in right now and has done a lot of work for the church, and also Suffolk Construction, which is the construction company working with Hart Howerton on those other major projects. And then we're looking at same thing with raising the classrooms. Can we raise those up? And we're looking at, can we raise the offices? So these are questions for, a little more involved, but it's pretty clear from what we've seen that if these things were raised up, like the parish hall, it would be unlikely we would have any water, any downtime, any need for remediation at all. So that's where we are. We've gone through kind of everything we have. What is the problem? What are we doing about it? So now is the exciting part where Casey has a microphone. And we don't have all the answers. We've been looking at stuff and meeting for a few months, so we're pretty far into it, but we are still open to, if anybody has any ideas, anything they know about that they think would help that we should look at, this is a chance for us to make sure we are on the right page, going in the right direction, and for you to know what we're doing. So we'll open it up. And just raise your hand, and Casey will come around with the microphone. And
Anyone? Here we go. Oh, over here.
Thank you. That was a really wonderful summary and bringing us all up to speed. Just a question. It seems like
thanks.
it seems like that very last solution, that raising the church, which I'm from New Jersey, they raised everything after Sandy. And obviously we don't know the answers yet because you have to get the input. What is your feelings now based on the feasibility of that? Is that something that can happen? That would solve a lot of problems, obviously.
So I'll speak briefly to that, and then I'm probably going to hand the microphone to John Ike, who is one of the committee members who's an engineer. But so we've asked these companies to look at whether they can do that. The original construction of the church is somewhat problematic. It was constructed such a long time ago, and it has something called a floating slab. I mean, it's a little problematic. The other issue with raising the church is, one question we have is, because many of the systems are quite old and it doesn't have the recent codes, we would probably have to install all of that as part of raising. And so it's a question of, does it really make sense to just do that? But we know that is probably, it's the long-term solution is to be higher, right? And so we're trying to figure out, what does that look like? John, you want to comment on that?
I think you've covered it well. There's a lot that's unknown about the current construction of the church. It's been added to over the years, and my personal opinion is that it would be difficult for a contractor to commit to doing that, and even to get business insurance to cover any untoward incidents. The other point that Mick alluded to, I think is called the 50% rule, that if you're improving over 50% of the structure or spending 50% of the current building cost, then everything needs to be brought up to code. And with all those constraints, to me it doesn't appear to be a feasible option. The jury is still out. We still haven't heard from Suffolk Construction, and we want to gather all the facts before we make any final judgments on that. But I'm just not sure it's technically or economically feasible.
And let me just add to that one thing. So when we raised the rectory, we actually, and you've probably seen this in New Jersey, and I've seen it in Virginia and other places, they actually picked up the house and we rolled it some people probably remembers, like we rolled this house slowly over a lot, and then we raised it up, and then we, put the new sort of foundation on it. I don't think we can do that, picking up, rolling it, moving, with the church. With the parish hall, we didn't pick it up and raised it. We knocked it down and built it new, higher. So, we have to, as we look across the street and decide what to do, we don't know that we can pick it up like you can a house and move it. It's just not the same type of structure. So, but we're asking the experts. We want to know what they think. There's some amazing things you can do. So, and then it's what can you do and what makes sense to do, right? That's the second question. You may be physically possible, able to do it, but is that the best thing for us to do given all the factors, given the age, given the difficulty, So that's what we're looking at. Oh, okay. Casey's going to walk around, so.
I think that was an excellent presentation, and we certainly have a responsibility to take care of our own property. On the other hand, the county has been doing some work with, I'm not sure if it's the Army Corps, but bringing in suggestions and looking at possible ways to reduce flooding. Is any of that relevant to what we're doing, or I don't even know what the status of it is right now?
So yes, the Army Corps of Engineers is doing a study with the county, a coastal resiliency study, and it's not done. And the first pass was rejected by the county commission because they were proposing building giant metal locks on all of our passes, and they've talked about the coastal portion is talking about either building giant sand dunes like in New Jersey, or possibly, I think the Conservancy weighed in and would prefer to see an artificial reef system or something off the coast. But they're in the process, and there's no guarantee that it requires the county and the federal government to agree on funding, which, we can't assume that our local government or the federal government are going to save us, basically, because there's just no guarantees there. We're better off, we think, just taking matters into our own hands. But it's good that you brought that up. We're monitoring that. I go to those calls and listen, and we're waiting to see if anything comes out of it.
You guys have done a great job, and thank you for all your work. I think you have thought of most of everything, it looks like. I was just curious, with the short versus long term, what type of time frames you thinking for that? Is it short term before the next hurricane? Or, next hurricane season, and what is long term? Is that 5 years or 10 years, or what are the timelines?
We're very conscious of the fact that, especially me, I'm very conscious of hurricane season coming up again. So with the flood protection barriers, that could be potentially put in place by next season. A wall, maybe or maybe not because of permitting. And we're waiting. David Feight's been involved with the city. The city, the position that they've taken recently is you can't buy and install flood panels without getting a permit from the city. The flood protection companies say, we install them without permits all the time. You don't need a permit. And there's a standoff between the private company and the city, which hopefully will be resolved soon, because everybody wants these flood panels. But flood panels, theoretically, assuming the manufacturer can keep up, and they do have some lag time, we could have those by next hurricane season. And then, of course, we'd be looking with the materials. We're making the changes with the materials to the places that are still being remediated. But if we had an event again, we'd be looking hard in the church about, instead of just putting it back exactly the way it was with drywall, we'd be looking at other materials to help with that in the short term. The long term, raising the church or somehow reconstructing the church so that it would be at a higher level, that's, anybody who's built a house in Naples or built anything in Naples, I mean, if we were doing if we made it exactly like it is now, then you would think that we would go through permitting not as slowly as building something completely new. But, you know, you're talking probably 2 or 3 years, right? Because you've got a year for permitting, and then you've got a year and a half for building, more or less. So, but I think it depends on how quickly we move. If we make a decision about something like that and we start moving now, we could probably have something done, and we think in a few years. If, depends on how long we wait around and look at things. But did that answer your question? But I don't think, if we started the process of doing that now, I don't think it's 5 or 10 years away. It's just a matter of us moving with deliberate speed to get it done.
One thing I would add to that is we are very conscious of the Oregon project, and so we are coordinating the long-term plan so that the Oregon project is not delayed, because obviously if we're going to change the structure of the church in any way, we need to know what that's going to be before we go ahead and finalize the mechanical portion, as Mick alluded to in his presentation.
Yeah, so let me speak to that briefly. The organ is, it takes a long time for these organs to be built. And so we have a ways to go before that organ is ready to be installed. But before we install it, we need significant structural improvements to the church. So it doesn't make any sense to put in those structural improvements if we're then later going to do something different with the church to raise it up. So that's something we're having to combine into the analysis to determine, what's the best thing to do.
Mick, the process that you're going through certainly seems solid. It seems robust. And I really appreciate the transparency, too. And frankly, from my perspective, there's a lot of confidence in what you guys decide or people decide eventually because of the nature of your process. So go at it. I mean, no, really, you're doing an excellent job, and this presentation is a testament to that. I have a few ideas, but
Yes.
I'll take them offline.
Okay, and thank you for that. I mean, everyone in town who has been affected by the storms is going through some type of process like this, whether it's informal or more formalized. And you can see what other people have done, like the Port Royal Club, for example. They made the decision. It was really after Ian, and it was partly driven by the FEMA requirements. They knocked it down and decided to rebuild at a level above FEMA. But everybody is facing these kinds of decisions, and it's so difficult because nobody has a crystal ball. I think we all thought after Ian that we wouldn't have another water event for maybe 50 years, 40 years. And this summer was a hard summer because not only did we have one event, we really had two, and maybe if you count Tropical Storm Debbie, 3. So everyone kind of said, okay, like we really need to be thinking about this right now. So we are.
Since the Turtle Club sits on the Gulf, can you tell us what you did specifically to keep the water out of it in Milton, and how effective was it, and would that work for any of our church properties?
Sure. So after Hurricane Ian, we bought Flood Risk America as a company that's in, I'll just tell you what, we contacted floodproofing.com, which is a company in New Jersey, which is like a distributor of flood products. They sent someone out, the same person who is coming in a week to look at the church, and they recommended we go with these flood panels that bolt onto the side of the building about 4 feet high from Flood Risk America, which is a manufacturer in Florida. So we purchased those panels, we put them up, and after Helene came by, we had water up to the beachside door, we had a ton of sand, and the carpet in the dining room was damp, but no real water. So they were successful in keeping out, but we did have water kind of coming up to the front of the building, so it was pretty successful. In Milton, we actually put giant 4-foot-high sandbags around the front because I was concerned that the sand was going to break down the front door. But that's a beach storm surge type event that we don't have here. But the sand came 4 feet high on the outside of those sandbags, and I think it would have damaged the doors without those. We still had the panels on, and after Milton, we had about this much water in, not throughout the whole restaurant, but in part of the restaurant. And in talking to the flood panel people, and this is an important concept, they tell you you're not going to keep all the water out. If there is 25 inches, 3 feet of water around the church, even with flood panels, if you get this much in the church, that's a win. So the idea that you can keep everything out by barriers is, even the barrier people, they don't like to make that promise. The only way to really keep everything out is to be high enough so that it's not a problem. So we were closed for about 10 days after Milton, because we had to crack the baseboard off and we had to dry the stuff, and we got a company in there that same day. And in the future, as we go into next season, I'm going to be my own remediation company. We're going to have all of our own stuff, and it's going to be in there within an hour of me getting on the property, just to speed it up, because you got to get the water out, and then you got to dry it, and the faster you do that, the better off you are. So the real takeaway from that is we don't have a problem with waves here, but the water, it's very hard to keep all the water out. If you have a lot of water around the property, I'm not an engineer, so there's hydrostatic pressure and there's seepage, and but we kept most of it out. And I think that's probably a similar experience to other people in town. And then occasionally, these flood protection systems are only as good as the people putting them up. For my business, I'm the last guy. I go around and I give everything an extra turn. But if you have people putting them up and they're, kind of putting them up, but they're not really putting them up, they can fail. And there was one dramatic instance of a failure, and I'm not sure if it was because of the product or because of the way people put it up, but around Blue Provence, they had this huge stacking aluminum thing. They had 3 feet of water in there after Milton. It was a failure. So, the flood protection systems are only as good as the person putting it up, and these rubber gaskets, they can fail. So my panels, I have to keep in air-conditioned storage, not touching anything else, and even then, every time you use it and you pull it off the wall, a little bit of that rubber is left on the wall. And so I talked to the company, and they said they're now starting a paid service, capitalism, to every year they'll come and inspect my gaskets and replace them for a fee. And I'm doing it because, but yeah, so it's not as simple as it sounds. Yes?
Could you tell me how much you think it would cost to rebuild the church?
That's a very good question. I don't have an answer to that. Does anybody else? Edward, you have an idea?
I've always gone too low, so I'm not going to give you that price, but I have been asking the construction companies and the architects. So a firmish number will be coming in the next week and a half, 2 weeks.
Okay.
So as part of, we are looking, because we're looking at the options, the dollars and the cents we're looking at too. But just take a step back and look at the size of the church building, right? It's a beautifully small church, very intimate. So it's not like we're building Notre Dame. So, that I think can answer for now. And as we get more information and we can provide that, we will.
So as a part of your remediation efforts, or keeping the water out in the first place, I'm always very concerned that the people who are supposed to do it don't show up, or don't show up on time. So how do you make sure that if you're going to put the fence around, obviously with the hospital up in Tampa, that's pretty easy because they have to do that. That'd be a disaster if that didn't take place. But in our situation, do we have assurance that we can actually get the people here when we need them?
That's a great question. That's why we put people like you in charge of that committee. I'm kidding, but it's a completely, we are talking about that because we know that, again, it takes a lot of people, and it takes people to come on the eve of a storm when everybody is busy protecting their families, their own property. So if we go with a flood protection system, whether it's church staff or volunteers or a paid company, we're going to have to be sure that we have someone, because for years there were lots of places in town that had flood panels and storms, and even in Ian, lots of places were damaged. They had panels, they didn't put them up. Why didn't they put them up? Because it's a pain to put them up. They're heavy, and you got to have the right people. And so the last thing we want to do is get a flood protection barrier system that is so much work that we can't put it up, or we don't put it up. I mean, yes, it's the logistics, and that's the thing, that the pressure on church staff when a storm is coming. Parishioners are calling Father Edward and our other priests. Chris is running around trying to get everything done. Kim is trying to have things lifted off the floor, and it's hard to get everything done. And so to add this on top of it is we need to assess whether you raised a practical concern, whether it's really practical.
So could you take us through, since you're down at Vanderbilt, what the Ritz did to keep itself free from a problem?
You know, I don't know what there is. I read yesterday they spent $5 million on some sort of system, and I thought, $5 million, wow. I want to find out what they did, but I don't know what the Ritz did. I know after Ian, they reconfigured some things in their building, but we'll find out what the Ritz did.
Well, they put up sandbags, but they also did foam.
Okay, yeah.
And I don't know how they did all that, but they put a lot of effort into it, because they suffered over $500 million of damage.
And sometimes I have heard of people putting up more traditional sandbags and then using the foam to seal the cracks in the sandbags.
That's what you do.
And so, but some of those things are not really, we use these giant 4-foot interconnected sandbags that's manufactured in Fort Myers, but the only thing that made that practical is we have an inexhaustible supply of sand in our yard. So, that's not really practical for Trinity to do. But we'll find out what the Ritz did, because we want to find out, kind of what everybody has done.
Mick, ideally, what would be the ideal height of protection over sea level that you'd want to achieve?
So that's a good question. I mean, certainly we would want to be above FEMA, which for the church would mean we'd have to go up about 4 feet, 3.5, 4 feet, right? Yeah. So, and I don't know if we would choose to go up, then it becomes just a matter of function. Well, John, why don't I let you answer this one?
Well, I think you began to allude to it. So first, yes, we're in an AE8 zone, so you definitely want to get to 8 and probably to at least 8.5 or 9 feet. Beyond that, you start to get in trouble with transitions. And by that I mean we have things like churchyards, sidewalks, existing structures that will not be raised. And the higher you go with the church to ensure less risk from floods, the more steps you'll need, the more ramps you need, and the more difficult, and aesthetically there's considerations too. So it's a great question. I think the real benchmark is that FEMA flood level plus 6 inches to 12 inches, quite honestly. But as long as I have the floor, I did just want to mention, and you're on the Pelican Bay Flood Resilience Committee. All of us know people. There's so many smart people throughout Naples looking at this now. And in March, there's actually a one-day seminar that's going to bring a lot of this together. And so we're all going to learn from each other, both formally and informally. So I just wanted to mention that as well.
Since flood level back when was only 5 feet, now FEMA's gone to 8 feet. Is there any, we don't know if they're going to raise it again, do we?
We don't. We don't have a crystal ball knowing. I think we would, again, planning for 25, 50, 100 years, we would try to be prudent and not do just what's the bare minimum now. At the same time, factoring in the things that John said, if we were going to raise something, we're not going to raise it up so high that none of us can get into it. Like at some point, you just have to do what you can, but there's other things that you can do, to try to. I mean, we're looking at everything, but it's a fair point, Polly. You can't predict the future. Nobody knows what's going to happen. You're just trying to do the best you can with the information you have at the time. Okay, Casey?
Yes.
Oh.
I appreciate the fact that we are all wondering what the worst number is going to be, and that you're going to do your best, Father Edward, to give us some sort of estimate, a reality estimate. Because we also understand that when this building was built, with your best intentions and estimates, you had to face unexpected costs in the course of the construction. So everybody is willing to give you a leeway of whatever it is, but a number is very helpful. Now, the problem with just giving us a number is that there's almost an assumption that everything else is free. And none of these other options are free either.
Correct.
And along with all the other options is a risk of them not being effective. Mm-hmm. If, in effect, you can have 2 inches, which I understood to be your number, 2 inches of water in the church, you're already dealing with problems with the floor and the pews and the walls and everything else. So when that number comes, could you just give us some indication of what these other options are going to cost too?
We will. We're going to look at, what are the costs of the flood barriers, what's the cost of different remediation, and when we make our report to the vestry, we'll include all of that. Because you're right, the flood panels are not free, they cost money, and they have the problems that we talked about associated with them, so that's a good point.
So first of all, Mick, as you guys have heard before, great job. Really, really encouraging to see all the big brains sitting up here working this out, thinking through the issues, and it's a blessing to be part of a parish that has this kind of brain power. So well done, you guys. I'm going to walk out of here today with supreme confidence that we're going to make some good decisions. So well done, all of you. I know we're running short on time. Just one quick thought. I understand very clearly with recency bias, the focus has to be on flooding. But you did talk about wind, and that is real. As a homeowner here in town who lost shingles in Irma, have we looked at the roofs, right? We talk about keeping water out from floods. Asphalt shingles are, to my understanding, the least wind-resistant material you can put on a building. If I'm not mistaken, most of our roofs are asphalt shingle. I don't know if that may not be the priority right here and now, given what we've been dealing with in the last few years, but I would just encourage the committee to consider that also as we begin to think about optionality with what we're going to do probably longer term, because it would be a shame to do all the wonderful things to raise these buildings or to make it flood proof, and then we have another Irma type event where we get, or even worse, where shingles are coming off and water's coming in through the roof.
It's a great point, and certainly whatever changes would be made to the areas that we're raising up, if at all possible, we'd be protecting against wind as well as water. So, because you're absolutely right. I mean, the wind has been a problem during that 60 years between Hurricane Donna and Hurricane Ian, the wind was a problem many times. We didn't have a lot of damage here. We've had probably some in the past, but everywhere else in town, you were always protecting from wind. And it's in my opinion, it's much easier to protect from wind doing certain things. That's pretty known. So, yeah, you would hope that, I think back to all the thousands of years, different churches and different cultures, and times when they've made changes to churches to protect them. I mean, Notre Dame obviously burning down and being rebuilt, but we'd be looking at making changes to make sure that Trinity could still be standing hundreds of years from now. And people might look back and think about this time when we had to make certain decisions, and you're right, we should be thinking about everything. So, anybody else? Okay, Edward, do you want to say any words of wisdom? I'd like to thank everybody for coming. If you have any other comments, grab somebody here, or you can send an email to resilience@trinitybythecove.com, and we will get the email and we will read it. We're still in the middle of looking at everything. But we're moving for some of the timing reasons mentioned. We're trying not to be, we're not dawdling either, because there's another hurricane season around the corner, and if we're going to do something more long term, then that's going to take time. We want to make a decision and get going. So, but please reach out to us if you have anything.
The only other thing I'd like to share for you all is the amount of work that the vestry and I, and actually you all, have been doing relative to hurricane resiliency for at least the past 10 years. We solicited a gift from the Briscoes for the Richard Briscoe Fund, which endows our insurance storm deductible. That's a big deal. You were talking about who shows up to help to help prepare the church for hurricanes. Some volunteers show up, but you're right. A lot of you all are taking care of your property, so it's Chris and me and the staff. One of the great things this past hurricane season is because of the Richard Briscoe Fund, we were able to put hurricane glass on the rectory, which saved me a good 3 hours of time so that I could focus on the church. And then we have been putting up the huge aluminum storm panels, which were in place this hurricane season. We do that as a matter of course. The other thing is we have pretty good insurance through Church Insurance of Vermont. It's sort of an Episcopal Church captured insurance company in a way. We have $1 million flood payout, but it only goes every 12 months. So we need to make it through next hurricane season to make sure we are insured, right? So that is a huge stressor in me. When we get to Hurricane Milton Anniversary Day, I'll be jumping for joy. The other thing that I'd say is, it's a big moment in the life of our parish to really think this through. We've had, 2 really bad years, but we're in a good position to make those decisions right now. We have a great group of people. We have a wonderfully vibrant church. One of the things that I'm concerned about is we get to make the decision when we're not really under too much pressure. We have another flood event next hurricane season. We haven't moved forward with some sort of thinking. I mean, the church staff and we're all going to be exhausted, and we're going to have to make a decision in an emergency way, and that's usually not good. So I'm thankful for this time and this space to think it through, and be patient and don't be anxious, and make sure to say your prayers, right? So God's going to take care of us. I am sure of it in some way. So pray for these people, and then pray for the vestry. And let's do that right now. The Lord be with you. Let us pray. Gracious Father, we give thanks for this wonderful parish family, for all the ways that we offer our time and our talents for the mission and ministry of the church, for the ways we're good stewards of its buildings so that people might come to this sacred space to say their prayers, to be at funerals and weddings and baptisms. We pray that you would strengthen within each of us your Holy Spirit, and that we might make wise decisions and do so with great love, not just for this generation, but for the generations to come. These prayers we offer through Jesus Christ our Lord. Go get them. And again, no question should go unasked. You see these people, give them your ideas and ask questions.